Hello, and welcome to the Week 1 lesson, Choose the Lifestyle, Not the Person. So this is the key question that we're confronting with this lesson. What expert should you choose? Now, some of the other lessons in Week 1 will help you with issues surrounding this question. For example, why you should not choose a superstar to be your expert. But let's say you've listened to those lessons and now you're ready to make the key choice. Who am I actually going to choose? Which expert is going to teach me how to quickly master my career? Now, this is actually a very important question. We need to give it its full due. By confronting it, you're going to have to sharpen what to this point might be relatively vague aspirations about your career. You might have it in mind that, well, I want to be very successful. That's why I'm taking the top performer course. I want to do better at what I do. But now we're actually having the rubber meet the road and asking the question, well, what does it mean to be successful in your career? What exactly are you trying to get to? What's the goal you're trying to get to? These type of issues have to be nailed down if you're going to successfully answer this key question of, well, what expert am I going to talk to? So in this lesson, I'm going to teach you what I think is one of the most important pieces of career advice that I've ever come across. And it's what I call lifestyle-centric career planning. Now, the basic idea here is simple. You work backwards from a lifestyle that resonates with you, not the specifics of a particular job. In other words, when you're saying, well, what do I want to do with my life? Or more relevant to this course, what do I want to do within the career that I've already chosen? Our instinct is to say, well, what type of work would I like or not like? What type of work resonates with me? Lifestyle career-centric planning, or lifestyle-centric career planning rather, flips that. It says, no, focus on, of the different paths available to me, what's the lifestyle they would produce? And which of those lifestyles resonates most? And that's the path I should follow. Now, there's a good reason why this works. We are actually not very well attuned to the specifics of jobs and how we're going to feel about specific work that we have to do within the context of a job. So if I say, I want you to think about being this type of executive versus this type of executive, we don't have a great instinct for which of those works would actually be more fulfilling for us. Right? We've never done it before, it's specific, we don't really understand maybe all that would be involved with these different career paths. On the other hand, we're very good and very well attuned to understanding different lifestyles. If I paint you a picture of a very busy but very powerful executive living in a big city, and then paint you a picture of someone who's spending half the day at a hammock and lives in a rural town in New Hampshire and works remotely a few hours a day, these are things that we have very vivid associations with, and most people can tell very quickly which of those options would be more likely to resonate. So for these reasons, when thinking about your career, it's often much more useful to work backwards from this sort of lifestyle that the career implies, as opposed to these technical specifics about what you would be doing in the job. Now, lifestyle-centered career planning is actually a very broad topic. As I mentioned, you could really use this to answer the biggest questions about what you want to do with your life, what career to take after college, what transition to make, major transitions to make in your career. But it also applies more narrowly. In particular, it can apply to selecting a path within an already selected career. Now, for our purposes in Top Performer and in Week 1, it's this more narrow application that matters, because what I'm going to advise is that we use lifestyle-centric career planning to help choose the expert that you're going to interview and use as the foundation of what you do in this course. So we're not going to apply lifestyle-centric career planning to decide broadly what you should do with your life. We're going to apply it to say, okay, of the different people in my field who are successful, which of them should I actually talk to for advice? In other words, which of their paths is one that's going to be most beneficial to me? So that's what we're going to do. When considering experts in your field, we're going to ask, whose life would I most like to live, not which expert is best or something else that's equally vague. So I think the best way to help detail the strategy is just to do a couple case studies. Let's take some people. These are examples that are inspired by the pilots of this course that we've run, so it's the type of people who take this course. Let's take some people and go through the different types of experts they might interview and see how there can be real differences in the lifestyles. So for example, in our first case study, let's consider this hypothetical student who we'll call Alice. Say Alice is a graduate student, she's studying science, she likes everything about science, she likes academia, she really thinks she wants to be a professor, so she is, let's say, taking top performer because she wants to be as successful as possible as a graduate student as moving on in an academic path. All right, so she's in week 1, she knows she needs to choose an expert to help her to learn about how to succeed in this particular field. Which expert should she choose? Now, her instinct might be, well, let's just see who's the most successful professor I know, and that's who I should interview. But once you start applying lifestyle-centric career planning, you would realize that the success or non-success of the expert is not the most important criteria. We need to also understand the different lifestyles associated with different paths. So, for example, Alice maybe knows a Nobel Prize winning scientist, a very successful professor. She could choose that Nobel Prize winning scientist as her expert, but let's see, what type of lifestyle does that scientist have? Well, it's probably going to be long hours of work, which is going to have a lot of sort of CEO type management of big teams and grant money. On the other hand, there's going to be a lot of recognition. Right? It can be very fulfilling. People will recognize you and know that you're very good, and then the work is probably exciting. It's probably cutting edge. On the other hand, as long as we're looking for different lifestyles, she might also consider, let's say, a professor at a smaller college in an idyllic setting, but a teaching college where there's not as much research going on. Right? So now the lifestyle is actually quite different. The setting would be beautiful. The pace of life might be slower. You ride your bike to work every day. You're home not too long after your kids get back from school. You might have these type of advantages. There'll probably be a stronger connection to the students. The Nobel Prize winning scientist is probably not spending a lot of time in the classroom, for example. If you have a small teaching college, these might be small classes, the undergrads. But on the other hand, you're not going to really get a lot of professional recognition. People aren't going to see you as a great scientist. The money is not going to be nearly as good as being a star scientist that schools are trying to hire it away. It could be intellectually exciting to be at a university, right, because you're surrounded by smart people thinking smart thoughts, but it's not going to be the same excitement of I'm doing Nobel caliber original research. Okay, now look, these are two different possible experts. One is traditionally way more successful than the other. But by using lifestyle-centric career planning, we see, well, what's more important here is that their lifestyles are much different. And that Alice, our hypothetical student, could be focusing in here on, well, which of these two lifestyles resonate with me? That's much more important than just saying who's more successful. Now, something I like to do is when doing lifestyle-centric career planning is look for some wild card options. That is, in searching for different types of lifestyles to choose from, use that to allow you to leave the obvious choices of experts that you can emulate. So for example, I'm going to put as the wild card expert choice here for Alice, David Epstein, who I'm just using his name somewhat randomly, but he's a very well-respected science writer. He writes about sports science. Okay, so this would be a wild card because she was thinking she wanted to be in academia. This would be a different use of her science background. Obviously, wouldn't be in academia, but what's the lifestyle? Well, if you're a science writer, you're going to have a lot of autonomy and location independence. It doesn't matter where you live. You kind of decide what you work on and when. It can be very intellectually stimulating to be a writer in that field, but it's also very competitive, or it's hard to get work. If you're doing well, you're doing very well, but you could also just be doing terribly. So it's uncertain, and sometimes the work can be pretty hard when you're trying to get these manuscripts together. So what we see here is three different types of experts that have three very different types of lifestyles. And now Alice could look at these different lifestyles and say which one resonates. And I would assume that one of these would probably resonate way stronger than the others for her, and that would guide her towards the expert that makes the most sense. Now notice, because we're looking at the lifestyle, we're able to consider many more options than if she just had said, who's the most successful person I know in this field? If, for example, Alice is really attracted to this idea of living at a beautiful college campus and knowing the students and having this nice pace of life, if she had just said, who's the most successful professor I knew, she would not have learned or even considered maybe the professor at the teaching college that could show her, well, if you want to succeed in this path, what you need to focus on is very much different than if you want to succeed in the Nobel Prize winner's path. Okay, let's try a second case study. So imagine we have an aspiring entrepreneur. Here's a standard scenario for the types of students who take this course. let's call this hypothetical student Bob. Let's say he has a job he doesn't really like that much. So he would like to have something with more autonomy, so he wants to set up a side business for now, succeed at that with the idea that he'll eventually gain professional and financial independence. He can quit his job and just run this business. What expert should Bob choose? Well, again, without lifestyle-centric career planning, he might just say, I don't know, who's the most successful entrepreneur I know. With lifestyle-centric career planning, we say, no, what are the different lifestyles available to me on the entrepreneur path? So, for example, an obvious choice might be the venture-backed CEO. In other words, someone who is a very successful entrepreneur. What's the lifestyle here? Well, the work is very hard. It's long hours. It can be very stressful. But it's very exciting when you're trying to raise money and grow a company from scratch. It can be very exciting, and it has this possibility of a really big payoff. You know, your company could grow and get sold for millions of dollars. It could make you rich. It's also something that's respected. People understand. You say, I have a startup. We're funded by Sequoia Capital. We have $5 million in backing. People understand it. They're like, yes, I get what you're doing. All right, but here's another type of approach. Our own Scott Young could be a reasonable expert for Bob because he's representing a different approach to entrepreneurship. He's a solo online entrepreneur. He owns his own company and makes money online. This has a very different lifestyle, as Scott would tell you, than being a venture-backed CEO. There's, of course, a lot more autonomy. Scott can decide, you know, what I want to work on and when. He can also pace his working life, have busy periods and less busy periods. And the money is good, but you don't have that possibility anymore that Google's going to buy you for $50 million and make you rich. Now, it requires a lot of self-direction and self-control, right? Because when it all comes down to you, the flip side is it's up to you to make things happen. So this can create uncertainty. So this is what the lifestyle would be like for someone like Scott, as he would attest. What's our wild card here? Well, I'm going to throw in Mr. Money Mustache. If you don't know who this is, he runs a blog, but he's famous for retiring in his early 30s. He basically preaches a gospel of how it's possible to retire very early and live off of your money. The key is twofold. You bring your expenses down to be very small, and then you save, therefore, most of your salary. And if you're not spending much money and you're saving most of the money you make, the break-even point to where you have enough assets that just interest and dividends can support your cheap lifestyle happens pretty quick. It can happen in 5 to 10 years. And so that's what he did. Now this is a wild card because it's not really running your own company, but it sort of falls within the general rubric of what our hypothetical student was looking for, which was more financial and professional independence. So the lifestyle of someone like Mr. Money Mustache is exciting in the sense that while you're pursuing it, it's a big deal, audacious goal. If achieved, it's fully autonomous. The idea with early retirement is not that you necessarily stop working, but it's that you don't need to work, and so you can just start working on projects on your own pace that you find interesting at the time. It's a completely different relationship with work. But you know, this lifestyle also has extreme frugality. Bob didn't like his job. You'd probably have to stick with it for a while, saving most of the money. And also, almost no one's going to understand what you're doing. You know, your parents, your aunts, your uncles, they won't understand that in the way they would understand I'm running a big company. And that can matter too. So again, by trying to get a diversity of different lifestyles when looking for experts, Bob has a lot more choices than if he just said, who's the most successful entrepreneur I knew. Probably one of these lifestyles would resonate more than the others. All right, let's do one more case study. Imagine we have Charlie who got a job at a big marketing firm. He's still pretty new to it, so he's at a low level, but he's getting good feedback. He's feeling efficacious. He's feeling competent. So he really wants to make a very successful career in marketing. Which expert should he choose? So even within an existing company, when we use lifestyle and try to get as many different lifestyles as possible to consider, we can still get a lot of diversity. The obvious choice would be the high-level executive. What's the lifestyle there? It's hard and stressful, but you know, you get paid, you get respect. But what about a principal at a boutique firm, maybe in like Portland, Oregon, or Ashland, or something like this? You know, this would be a different lifestyle, something that's creative, and the workload's probably a little more reasonable than the executive. The money's fine, but not great. But the setting and lifestyle is nice. But it has some downsides, like you might not feel like your career has momentum after a while. You'll hit the ceiling pretty quickly in a small company. All right, but let's throw in a wild card. So I threw in my friend Ryan Holiday as the wild card. He was involved in traditional marketing for American Apparel, and now, among other things, runs a sort of maverick book marketing firm where they focus on books and do sort of interesting things. So, there's the excitement. If you do something like this, like choose a niche industry and start up like a one-man or two-man shop to do sort of maverick work in that industry, there's a lot of excitement. You're being disruptive, and you get to meet interesting people, go to conferences. Ryan has a very interesting life. But again, there's sort of there's uncertainty in starting something new like that, and the reality of the work when you're in these new niches can sometimes be not so glamorous. Right. So a lot of the work on marketing books might turn out to be actually not that interesting, and if it's just you or just you and a couple other people, you're doing that work. So again, there's a lot of different lifestyles available within this world of marketing, and Charlie should choose which lifestyle resonates before selecting the expert. So let me summarize. Working backwards from the lifestyle that resonates with you is really going to help you better understand yourself, right? What really are you looking for in life? And you're going to uncover more expert options than if you just say, I don't know, who's successful in my field? Who do I know? So I think it's really important that you follow the example of the case studies and go even farther. Create a very large table of options before making your decisions, because you might not even know what lifestyles are possible or what resonates with you until you really get out there and try to find as many as possible. So your goal should be, I don't know, I want at least 5 different distinct lifestyles relevant to career paths in my field. And you keep looking for examples and meeting people and talking to people and really thinking hard and doing some wild cards until you can find at least 5 different lifestyles. This is really going to broaden up your options and make it more likely that you notice something that really does resonate. And again, I have to emphasize this strategy works well. It works better than just trying to think through what type of work would be best for me or what expert seems like the best person. And that's because when you're doing this lifestyle-centric planning, you're really optimizing for something that's quite important, which is how much you'll enjoy your life. Right? Who cares if a particular type of work sounds appealing to you if the lifestyle that surrounds it is one that makes you miserable? So by looking at the thing that ultimately matters, do I like the day-to-day rhythms of my life, you're really optimizing your selection towards the types of metrics that are going to make you happiest. So when you choose your expert, keep lifestyle in mind and make it one of the key factors you use in deciding which path in my field you want to go. I think you'll be surprised when you apply this exercise to discover how many different options there are for you, paths you hadn't even thought of before, and hopefully you'll be excited by some of the options that you uncover. Thank you.